This is the first video that I've had to record about my best mate, business partner, and family member, Smokey. Unfortunately, he passed away recently. And I think I really owe it to him to tell his story about the interesting life that he lived. He significantly changed the lives of 2 families and another dog. So, let's get into it. So his life started normally enough in Melbourne, and he was sold to a couple and they decided to name him Niji. Now a bit of time passed and Niji became a great supporter for his main human, Nina, as she went through a pregnancy, and she had to fight some health issues during that pregnancy as well. Now some time had passed and Niji now had a baby human brother to play with. And as soon as the family was formed, they had to make the long road trip from Melbourne to Ayers Rock as work required for the family to move there. So Niji, along with his 2 favourite humans, Nina and his human baby brother, went on a 3-day road trip. And also, well done to Nina, as driving by herself for 3 days with an infant and a puppy across the Australian Outback, I mean, that's kind of an achievement. But it was after this move, however, that things went from good to not so good. I don't want to get into too much detail, but alcohol and mental health issues were involved, and Niji was now in a very miserable situation. Niji gave everything that he could to protect his human baby brother and his mother during a very bad situation. Now he always both stood physically and metaphorically beside his mum Nina. And as some time went past, circumstances allowed for his mum Nina and his baby human brother to escape interstate back to Victoria. But unfortunately, Niji could not escape with them. And Nina still credits Niji for getting her through some of the hardest times of her life, with both her health issues of the pregnancy and also during the very difficult family situation. Now she is still torn to this day that she could not find a way to take Niji with her when she escaped. But unfortunately it was just not possible. Her escape required a lot of moving parts and there was no room for error. And also she had some hope that Niji could do for her ex what he had done for her during her hard time. But unfortunately this wasn't to be. So about a month had passed where Niji was living with Nina's ex. And her ex decided to both end his and Niji's life by setting his unit on fire. But he changed his mind halfway through the attempt and then went outside whilst leaving Niji inside to die alone in the unit fire. Niji was trapped alone in the unit with no way to get out, and the room was getting darker and darker and the air was getting thicker and thicker. He was scared frozen and he just sat on the couch not knowing what to do. But fortunately a neighbour came home from his midnight shift and he noticed that there was a bit of smoke coming from the unit. So he called the local fire and rescue auxiliary team, and the neighbour suggested that it was possible that the mother and son were still in the unit in there as well, because he didn't know that they had escaped a few weeks earlier. And so the fire and rescue team were given a directive to go in there, see if they can find Niji's mother and brother, and also to extinguish the seat of the fire. Now the team entered the structure through the front door, and 10 seconds later the front door opened again unexpectedly. Now the attack team, who were tasked with doing the search and putting out the fire, they put this dark grey dog outside, and then continued back inside to finish the primary search for the other occupants. Now, the attack team described how easy it was to rescue him because he's on the couch near the front door. Now, I asked later on if he tried to run away, if he ran to them, or how he was towards them, and it turns out he didn't do anything, basically just shivering on the couch. And they could even feel it through all the layers of PPE, the personal protective equipment that they were wearing. So anyway, a bit of time passed, the attack team had extinguished the fire, and now Niji could not be located. It was a chaotic situation at first, and there was only 4 of us initially trying to deal with the whole ordeal. Now, by the time more fireys, paramedics and police arrived, Niji had run away. He had run away into the Outback because he was scared by all of the local drama. And if this had been anywhere else, this would not have been much of an issue. But because of the Outback, unfortunately, this is an issue. So in the Red Centre, there's a bit of a wild dingo problem, and they'd previously killed other people's dogs whilst they were out walking them. So Smokey, being away from his unit in unfamiliar territory, he was in a very dangerous situation. Fortunately, Niji had managed to evade the dingoes for the night and also the dingo baits, and he became very hungry and he cautiously returned to his old home. But there was no one there familiar for him anymore. He had no one to turn to as his original carer had been taken away for medical care. But the police were there as they were trying to investigate the incident, and they also tried to catch Niji. But Niji did not know that they were there to help, and so he actually bit one of the officers in the hands as he tried to grab him. And so it was being a little bit difficult. Unfortunately, there was a housekeeper nearby, and he lured in Niji into a vehicle by offering affection and treats. Works every time. So the officer that had his hand bitten, he offered to keep Niji in his yard until they could figure out where he was meant to go. Also note that this is a town of a population of like a few hundred. There is no local RSPCA. And at first, nobody knew Niji's name, so everyone just called him Smokey because he was a white dog that was covered in smoke and was now very dark grey. So the officer got a hold of his former mum, Nina, but she could not take him as she was barely settled in Melbourne and not in a situation where she could look after a dog, basically being a single mum now. To make matters even harder, she was actually overseas for her father's funeral and didn't have a base put Niji in Melbourne for when she does return, which would be months away anyway. And the officer could not keep him either, as he already had a dog, and these two dogs did not exactly get along. In fact, he kept his own dog inside at night, and he kept this mystery smoky coloured dog outside for the whole 2 weeks. So Niji had to wonder if this is going to be his new life. It was the middle of winter, and the nights are about 0 degrees. But fortunately for this smoky coloured dog, the police officer had his best interest at heart. Whilst he pondered his future, the police officer approached all the fireys who responded to the incident, asking if any of us wanted to adopt this smoky coloured fox. He even washed him to get the first layer of smoke off him, just to make him seem more appealing to us. So he approached all the fire and rescue crew one at a time to see if any of us wanted to adopt him. And Grace and I were actually the third choice, as the attack team who extracted him were offered first, but are unable to adopt him due to personal family situations. And I was the driver pump operator of the night, so I was the next in line to be asked. So Grace and I, we did adopt him, and we decided to stick with his new nickname rather than his legal name. So his name, henceforth, will be now known as Smokey rather than Niji. And it was a real team effort to save Smokey. His original human mum raised him and trained him very well. Fire and rescue team got him away from the fire, and the police made sure that he would never be in that situation again and got him away from future harm. And then Grace and I took over the baton when we adopted Smokey. So Grace and I felt like that we'd taken on a very big responsibility. As one, we did not want to let down the new dog Smokey, and also we did not want to let down the team that had worked so hard to keep him safe for so long. And I remember when Grace was filling in the paperwork at the local police station to officially adopt Smokey, and a lot of people perked their heads up saying, "Oh, are you adopting that psycho dog?" So he'd gotten a bit of a reputation of being a bit of a nervous spider because he was a bit of a nervous wreck, and for understandable reasons at the time. And my fiance's and now wife's reply, Grace, she said, "He's not psycho, he's cute." Oh, and this is something I really need to mention about Niji or Smokey as well. He is a bit of a nervous spider or a bit of a nervous nipper, and I'll talk more about that later in this video. Now, I was actually a little bit hesitant to adopt Smokey at first, but Grace, my wife, talked me into it, and I'm so glad that she did. We adopted him, and neither of us have ever had a pet before, so we had no idea what we were doing. For the first week, we had to make do with the help of friends, as we didn't even own a collar or a dog lead, and there was no local dog shop. In fact, the nearest one was 5-hour drive away. And he loved Grace at first sight, but for me, he took a bit of a while to warm up to me. In fact, when we first got him, he didn't like any adult males. And to this day, I still remember our first family walk, and we actually had to carry him a short way into the walk. And this is because his paws had become so soft that they could not really withstand the bitumen road. We had forgotten that he hadn't really been on many walks for the last month when he was staying with Nina's ex. So we had to carry him. But after taking him for a few adventures and a few drives, our bond grew. On my first day off, I drove him for 5 hours to the nearest vet in Alice Springs to confirm that no damage had been done to his lungs, and also just to check that we have an overall health. Also, we originally thought that Smokey was untrained until we ran into a mutual friend that started giving him commands in Thai. And surprise, surprise, he actually was very well trained. He knew all the commands, he knew all the standard tricks. But I figured it's much easier to retrain Smokey in English than what it was for me and everyone else in Smokey's life to learn Thai. But he was a smart dog, and he figured it out pretty quickly. Now, this mutual friend put us in touch with Smokey's previous human mum, and we exchanged some information about him. Now, she was so grateful that he was now in safe, loving hands, as she was so worried about Niji's or Smokey's health in her ex's hands. So she was just although she was heartbroken she couldn't have him herself, she was just very relieved and very happy that he just was now safe and in loving hands again. Now, before we'd even met Smokey, Grace and I had organised to move to Brisbane from Ayers Rock, and of course Smokey was going to come with us. Now, it was our first big family adventure, and he rode in my car during the day as my car had air conditioning, and Grace's car at night because it was an old van and it didn't have air conditioning. And when you're this fluffy, the summer heat is not really such a good thing. So on this adventure, he chased cats in South Australia, he got to smell the scents of rural New South Wales, and he enjoyed the Queensland outback roads. And now, after some time, we're in Brisbane. Now, Smokey got to meet all of Grace's and my childhood friends and family, and he was an instant hit. We could see that Smokey was so happy to be with us. He was our white shadow. I called him the walking toilet brush. Wherever I was, he seemed to be within 2 meters. But he still did have issues from his past though. He used to snatch food out of people's hands and then guard it very aggressively, and he ate his own poo. And he was super aggressive to people if he could smell alcohol in their breath, and he was very wary of all strangers. Now, over time, we overcame most of these issues by never skipping meals. That basically prevented the food snatching issue. We increased his social interactions, which lowered his stranger anxiety, and we gave him treats for not eating his own poo. In fact, it became a bit of a funny morning thing that he'd proudly trot up to me in the morning, and I'd know from the way he was trotting that he'd just done a poo. We used to call it his post-poo trot. So we felt like that we had saved Smokey, but little did I know that within a couple of years, he'll be doing something incredible for me